Let us be very still for a moment, for the message that unfolds in this hour cannot be received by the mind that rushes, or the mind that seeks to accumulate ideas. Truth reveals itself only in the quiet atmosphere, where we are not trying to get something, not trying to achieve something, but simply resting in the awareness that God already is. It is in that stillness that the infinite way becomes more than a teaching. It becomes a living presence. Now, in our work today, we are not here to learn how to heal, for no human being has ever healed anything. What we seek is an understanding of what healing truly is. If you imagine healing to be the act of removing a condition, correcting a body, or manipulating a circumstance, you will miss the entire essence of this message. Healing, in the spiritual sense, is the revelation of God's presence where a problem seems to appear. It is the unveiling of what has been true from the beginning. All throughout the years of this ministry, students have asked, Joel, what do you do before a healing? What is the method? What is the practice? And I have said, there is no method, but there is a way of being. There is an inner posture from which healing flows naturally, as light flows from the sun. It is not a technique you can memorize, and it is not a formula you can repeat. It is a state of consciousness in which the personal sense of self is quiet, and God is allowed to reveal God. You see, the great mistake of metaphysics is the belief that we can improve the conditions of life by thinking rightly, speaking affirmations, or holding strong mental positions. But the infinite way does not rest upon the powers of the human mind. We are not here to think our way into truth. We are here to yield to truth. All true spiritual work begins where thought ceases and awareness unfolds. And so, as we enter this hour together, understand that healing does not come because we change an outer condition. Healing comes because we awaken from the illusion that there is an outer condition separate from God. We are not striving to bring God into the situation. We are recognizing that God has never been absent from it. Let this be our introduction then, that every healing, every revelation, every moment of grace is born not through effort, not through belief, and not through the activity of the human mind, but through that sacred stillness in which God speaks, and the personal sense of self grows quiet enough to hear. As we proceed, let us remember that spiritual truth is not attained by accumulating ideas, nor by struggling to understand with the intellect. Truth is realized in the measure that we release the mind from its labor and rest, in the awareness that God constitutes our consciousness, our life, and our being. And it is precisely because truth is spiritually discerned that mental effort cannot heal. You see, the human mind, no matter how refined, knows only the world of appearances. It knows only what it has been taught, what it has observed, what it has reasoned, and the realm of appearances is never the realm of spirit. Therefore, when the mind attempts to correct a condition, whether bodily, financial, emotional, or relational, it is attempting to manipulate the shadow rather than touching the substance. It is trying to rearrange the picture on the screen rather than turning to the light that projects the image. And so long as we remain occupied with the screen, no change can be lasting. This is why the practitioner who tries to think his way into truth achieves only temporary relief, if any at all, for thought itself belongs to the realm of effect. The human mind cannot touch the invisible cause from which harmony flows. The moment we rely upon thought, upon will, upon direction, we have turned away from the infinite that heals and returned to the finite that struggles. Mental effort arises from fear. Whenever we feel compelled to affirm, to declare, to struggle inwardly for a spiritual position, we are unknowingly confessing that we still believe in a power apart from God. We still believe in a condition that must be changed or an error that must be destroyed. But in the infinite way, we do not attempt to remove error. For error has no law, no substance, no principle, and therefore no power. What is without power cannot be healed. It must be seen through. And so we learn that the human mind cannot remove an illusion. It can only perpetuate it. When a person faces disease and begins to mentally declare health, he is merely fighting with his own concepts. When he perceives lack and begins to affirm abundance, he remains entangled in the belief that supply is something external to be demonstrated. All of this arises from the mistaken conviction that thought is a power. But thought is not power. Spirit alone is power. Now, understand this. Spiritual healing is not the product of mental force. It is the revelation of spiritual presence. When the practitioner becomes still quiet, receptive, he stops looking at appearances. He stops battling conditions. He stops trying to make truth operate. And in that holy quietness, a shift takes place. The mind yields. The sense of personal responsibility dissolves. And into that openness, the Spirit of God rushes like a tide returning to its shore. In the absence of mental effort, there is peace. And that peace is the power. That peace is the presence that heals. Not the peace we create, but the peace that reveals itself when we stop creating. Therefore, mental effort cannot heal because mental effort is the activity of the personal self, and the personal self, no matter how sincere, has no power. It is only as the personal sense diminishes that the God sense reveals itself, and in that revelation, harmony appears not as something attained, but as something forever present, awaiting our recognition. As we move deeper into this message, let us understand that true spiritual healing is unlike anything the human mind has been conditioned to accept. In the world, healing is thought of as the process of correcting a condition, adjusting the body, or removing a discord. But in the infinite way, healing is not the activity of restoring harmony to a condition. Healing is the revelation of harmony that has never been absent. It is not the improvement of matter. It is the unveiling of spirit. First, let us see this clearly. Nothing in the outer world needs to be changed for healing to occur. The visible form, whether a body, a relationship, or a circumstance, is never the cause of discord. It is only the picture on the screen of consciousness. And because the picture is but an effect, it possesses no power, no law, no substance of its own. To try to change the picture is to work in the wrong direction entirely. In true healing, we turn from the appearance. We withdraw our gaze from the body, from the condition, from the reports of sense. We release all desire to fix, improve, or transform the external scene. Instead, we retire into the sanctuary of inner stillness, and there we contemplate the nature of God, not for the purpose of changing anything, but to behold the truth that has forever been. The moment we turn inward, we discover a principle. God is the only presence, the only power, the only life. God is not somewhere else, waiting to be invoked. God is not standing apart from the condition, waiting to be brought into it. God is the very substance of being, the essence of every form, the life of every individual. Therefore, to recognize God is to recognize the perfection that is already present behind the appearance. This is why Joel never treated a condition. He never addressed a disease. He never worked on a problem. He turned entirely away from the appearance, because he understood that the appearance is not the reality. He did not heal a sick man. He recognized that behind the appearance of a sick man stands the perfect spiritual identity of God's own being, and it was this recognition that dissolved the appearance. Spiritual healing is never directed outward. It is the shift within consciousness that reveals the harmony already established in God. When the practitioner perceives the truth, when he sees through the illusion of a separate self, a material condition, or a second power, the appearance changes of its own accord, not because the practitioner has changed it, but because the false belief has been dissolved. It is like watching a dream fade upon waking. When you awaken, the dream does not need to be corrected. It simply loses its seeming reality. In the same way, when we awaken to the truth that God is the substance of all being, the dream of discord disappears. This is the nature of spiritual healing, not the removal of error, but the recognition of truth, not the correction of matter, but the realization of spirit, not the struggle with conditions, but the quiet knowing that God alone is. And so, in all healing work, our task is not to address a problem. Our task is to behold God. Healing occurs as the consequence of seeing rightly, not as the result of doing something. The practitioner who sees God is the practitioner who heals not through power, not through technique, but through the simple awareness of what is eternally so. Now we come to the heart of this entire message. For all spiritual healing, all spiritual teaching, all spiritual realization rests upon one simple, sacred practice, the practice of entering the silence. Not the silence created by suppressing thought, nor the silence enforced by discipline, but the silence that naturally appears when the personal sense of self becomes still and the presence of God is allowed to reveal itself. Before every healing, before every class, before every moment of spiritual ministry, there was always this pause, not a pause filled with thought, not a pause filled with effort, but a turning inward, a release of the world and all its appearances, a quiet recognition that God is already here, already present, already the life and substance of all being. Do not imagine that this pause was a technique. It was not a method to induce healing or to attract divine power. Rather, it was the simple acknowledgement that nothing could be accomplished through human means. In that moment of stillness, the practitioner laid down every burden, every sense of personal responsibility, every belief that he must act, think, or perform. He surrendered the small, anxious self that seeks to fix the world and allowed the infinite to take over. This is the secret silence, a turning away from the belief that we, as human beings, must do anything at all. It is the recognition that God is the only doer, the only activity, the only presence operating. When we are quiet enough, this truth begins to reveal itself, not as a thought, not as a sensation, but as a gentle assurance, a subtle warmth, a quiet knowing. I am here. All is well. You see, in this silence, we are not trying to bring God into a situation. We are not invoking divine power. We are not attempting to reach God. Rather, we are acknowledging that God is already the substance of the situation, that God is the very presence in which we stand, that God is the life of the individual before us. And as this realization dawns, even faintly, the appearance of discord begins to lose its seeming reality. The purpose of this silence is not to remove conditions. It is to feel the presence. And once the presence is felt, whether strongly or softly, the work is complete. For where the presence of God is realized, The illusion of a power apart from God cannot continue. This entire practice, then, could be described in one statement: be still and know that I am God. Not work, not strive, not treat, but be still. In this stillness, fear dissolves. In this stillness, the belief in two powers disappears. In this stillness, the personal sense yields, and divine consciousness reveals itself as the only reality. And it is this revelation, not our thoughts, not our words, that performs the healing. When we enter the secret silence, we make no effort to improve, to change, to fix, or to persuade. We simply rest in the truth that God is on the field, God is the only activity, and God is the life of every form. And when this realization dawns, harmony naturally follows, as light follows the rising sun. This is the one practice upon which all spiritual healing rests, entering the secret silence where God is known, and allowing that knowing to dissolve every appearance of discord. As we go further, let us understand that the realization of God's presence does not come as the result of human timing, nor does it respond to our desire that it appear quickly. The unfolding of spiritual realization is as natural and as effortless as the dawning of the morning light. We cannot hasten it, and we cannot delay it. Our part is simply to be still, receptive, open, resting in the awareness that God is. When we enter the silence, there is no need to wait for a particular feeling, nor to seek an inner sign. Sometimes the sense of presence comes immediately, like a warm breath moving through consciousness. Sometimes it comes slowly, almost imperceptibly, as though a veil were lifting from the surface of the mind. And at other times, there may be no perceptible sensation at all, only a quiet certainty that something real is happening, though unseen. It is important to realize that this unfolding is not an experience of the intellect. It does not come as a thought, a conclusion, or an insight. Rather, it is an inner shift, a change in the atmosphere of consciousness. Without effort, without thought, the fear that once seemed present begins to dissipate. The concern that gripped the mind loosens. A sense of peace, perhaps subtle at first, begins to rise like a tide returning to shore. This peace is not of our making. It is not the result of affirmation or mental discipline. It is the presence announcing itself. It is God revealing God. It is the realization, silently communicated within, that I am here. This feeling of peace, whether faint or full, is the healing consciousness. It is the evidence of the Spirit at work. Now understand this. Healing does not occur because we have reached God. Healing occurs because we have removed the obstruction of fear, belief, and mental interference, and thereby allowed the presence to reveal itself. In that revelation, there is no longer a condition to be corrected. There is only the awareness that God is the life, the substance, and the being of all creation. And in that awareness, discord dissolves as darkness disappears when light enters a room. There is a moment, a quiet inner moment, in which the practitioner knows that the work is complete. Nothing dramatic takes place. No voice speaks, no vision appears, yet there is a gentle certainty, like the settling of still waters, that the presence has been recognized, and once the presence is recognized, the healing is inevitable. At that moment of release, the practitioner does nothing more. He does not continue thinking. He does not continue praying. He does not attempt to push the healing along. He rests. He leaves the entire situation in the hands of the infinite, for the work is no longer his. The healing has already taken place in consciousness, and the outer form will follow in due time. This is how realization unfolds quietly, naturally, without strain. It is the flower opening in the morning sun. It is the fruit ripening on the branch. It is the tide rising on the shore. It comes not by effort, but by grace. When the presence is realized, the work is finished. Let us continue now to the reason this simple, silent practice succeeds where all mental effort fails. The power lies not in the practice itself, nor in the one who practices, but in what takes place when the personal sense withdraws and the spiritual presence reveals itself. Healing does not occur because we have achieved stillness. Healing occurs because in stillness we cease to obstruct the activity of God. The first reason this practice succeeds is that God is the only healer. No human mind, no personal will, no effort of thought has ever healed a single condition. When we are quiet enough to relinquish the impulse to think, to affirm, or to direct spiritual power, we make room for the infinite to perform its own work. In that moment of surrender, the activity of God takes over. And where God is active, discord cannot stand. The second reason is that error has no power. All discord, whether sickness, lack, or fear, is not a reality to be overcome. It is a belief without law or substance. When we attempt to correct error, we grant it a power it does not possess. But when we become still and feel the presence, we recognize that error is but an appearance, a shadow without reality, and in the light of truth, shadows disappear of themselves. This practice succeeds because in the silence we come face to face with the great principle of the infinite way. There are not two powers. If you approach healing with the belief that there is a condition to be removed, you are still believing in a power apart from God. In stillness, however, we become aware that God is the only power operating in this universe, and the realization of one power dissolves the belief in another. The third reason this practice succeeds is that God is the only cause. All harmony flows from the invisible source within us. When we rest in God's presence, we are dwelling at the point of cause. The visible world, the body, the condition, the circumstance is merely effect, and when cause is realized as God, the effect must reflect that realization. Harmony appears not because we impose it upon the body or the world, but because the body and world are the outward expression of an inward awareness. The fourth reason is this: grace flows where interference ends. Human thought is interference. Fear is interference. Personal responsibility is interference. When these melt away in the silence, the flow of divine grace resumes naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. Grace does not need to be summoned. Grace is always present, always active, always seeking expression. Our stillness allows that expression to take place. Finally, this practice succeeds because it aligns us with reality. We are not trying to create harmony. We are not trying to attract spiritual power. We are simply acknowledging the truth that harmony already is, that God already is, and that nothing stands outside the one infinite presence. In the presence of this realization, the appearance of discord has no foundation upon which to rest. Thus, the silent recognition of God's presence is the secret of all spiritual healing, not because silence has power, but because in silence we withdraw the belief in a self apart from God. And when that belief dissolves, only truth remains. Now we come to a very practical point in our work, not practical in the human sense of applying a technique, but practical in the spiritual sense of learning how to rest in the presence throughout the day. For this way of life is not confined to the moments when we are asked to help another. It is a way of living, a way of being, a continual turning toward the kingdom within. Each morning, before the world begins to press its demands upon you. Take a few moments to sit quietly, not to think, not to affirm, not to pray for anything, but simply to turn your attention inward and acknowledge the presence. There is no need for words. Simply rest in the gentle recognition. God is. Let that be enough. As you sit there, without striving, you may become aware of a subtle peace, or you may not. It does not matter. What matters is the act of turning within, of acknowledging that the source of your life is not external, but the infinite that indwells you. In the course of the day, you will find many occasions to pause inwardly. You may be in the midst of activity or conversation. You may be at your work or walking along a quiet path. In any moment, take a single breath and gently turn your thought toward the invisible, not with effort, but with the soft remembrance. God is here. That remembrance itself is prayer. It is the recognition of one presence in the midst of whatever appears. Do not imagine that you must set aside long periods for meditation or silence. What is essential is the quality of awareness, not the length of time. A brief moment of recognition, just a breath of remembrance, opens the way for the presence to reveal itself. If you do this repeatedly throughout the day, you will find that your consciousness becomes attuned to the invisible. You will begin to sense the activity of God unfolding in even the smallest details of your experience. When a problem arises, whether your own or someone else's, your first impulse may be to address it mentally, to fix it, to correct it, to improve it. But in the infinite way, our response is always the same. We turn within. We recognize that the problem has no power apart from our belief in it. We drop the mental struggle, not by force, but by surrender. And in that silent turning, we remember God alone is. You will find that as this becomes your habitual response, the fear that once accompanied problems will gradually dissolve. If the situation is grave or urgent, do not hasten to treat it. Do not rush into the appearance. Simply withdraw within yourself and wait. Wait until some measure of peace arises. Even if the peace is faint, it is enough. That peace is the presence announcing itself. It is the assurance that God is on the field. Once the presence is felt, even lightly, your work is complete. The rest belongs to God. In time, this practice becomes second nature, not as a discipline, but as a way of living, a way of seeing. You discover that you carry within you a sanctuary of peace that is untouched by the world. And from that sanctuary, you meet all experiences, not with fear and resistance, but with quiet confidence in the one presence, the one power, the one life. Do not attempt to perfect this practice quickly. Give no thought to success or failure. Simply be willing to turn within again and again until it becomes natural. And as it becomes natural, you will find that life begins to unfold with less strain, less struggle, less effort. Harmony flows where the personal sense withdraws and the God sense is allowed to govern. As we draw nearer to the heart of this message, let us look more closely at what healing truly means within the infinite way. For unless this is understood, we remain tempted to think of healing as the correction of a condition, the restoration of health, or the improvement of outward circumstances. But spiritual healing is none of these. It is something far deeper, far more profound, far more transformative. Healing, in its true spiritual sense, is the moment in which the presence of God is realized in consciousness. It is the instant in which we perceive that what appears as discord has no law, no substance, no power, and no reality in the presence of God. The healing does not lie in changing the appearance. The healing lies in the realization that the appearance never had true existence. You see, we are not attempting to make a sick person well. We are beholding the eternal truth that behind every appearance, no matter how distressing, stands the perfect and complete expression of God. When we behold that truth not as a theory, not as a hope, but as an inner realization, the appearance shifts of its own accord, because the appearance was only the embodiment of our former belief. The practitioner's task is always the same: to behold God, not to heal a condition, not to treat an illness, not to change a circumstance, but to behold God. For in the degree that God is realized, God as the only presence, the only power, the only life discord dissolves. It cannot stand in the presence of realized truth, just as darkness cannot remain when the sun rises. This is why healing in the infinite way is never personal. The practitioner does not heal. The patient does not heal. God reveals God, and in that revelation, the illusion of discord evaporates. It is not corrected. It is seen through. What was never created by God cannot endure in the consciousness that knows God. Thus, healing is not an act, it is an awareness. It is not the effort to make harmony appear. It is the recognition that harmony is the nature of reality and has always been present, awaiting only our acknowledgement. Healing is the lifting of the veil of fear, the veil of belief in two powers, the veil of trust in appearances. And when the veil lifts, what remains is the eternal perfection of God expressed in all creation. Healing also has a deeper meaning. It is the transformation of consciousness itself. Each healing reveals to us a little more of the truth. Each healing removes a little more of the personal sense. Each healing brings us closer to the realization that the kingdom of God is not something we attain, but something we awaken to. As the personal self diminishes, the God self begins to shine through. This is the real healing, the dawning of spiritual identity. And so, the meaning of healing in the infinite way is this: a shift from the belief in a world of appearances to the realization of the world of spirit. A shift from seeing life as material to knowing life as divine. A shift from being a person attempting to reach God to recognizing oneself as an expression of God. Once this is understood, healing becomes natural, not a miracle, not a mystery, not an exception, but the natural outcome of knowing the truth that has always been so. As we bring this hour to a close, let us once more enter that quiet place within, for it is in the silence that everything we have contemplated becomes living truth rather than intellectual understanding. Let us release every effort, every thought, every desire to remember or apply anything we have discussed. For the truth does not need application, it needs realization, and realization comes only in stillness. In this moment, let there be a gentle turning inward, without expectation, without seeking. We are not trying to achieve a state of mind. We are not attempting to contact God. We are acknowledging the presence that has been with us all along, the presence that breathes us, sustains us, lives as us. Let us rest in the awareness that God is here, not as a distant principle, but as the very life of our being. In this silence, you may notice that there is nothing to fear, nothing to resist, nothing to overcome. There is only God appearing as the harmony, the intelligence, the substance of all creation. And as you sit in that awareness, even for a moment, you will feel the weight of the world lessen. The anxiety that once seemed so real begins to lose its grip. The concerns that once appeared urgent fade into the background. For in the presence of God, all is well. Carry this awareness with you as you return to your daily affairs. not as something you must hold on to, but as a quiet knowing that accompanies you naturally. Let your day unfold from this center of peace, without striving, without rushing, without the belief that you must determine or control the outcome. The presence that revealed itself in this hour goes before you. It prepares your way. It governs your actions. It maintains your harmony. Each time you feel the world pressing upon you, pause for a single moment, turn inward, and remember God is here. Not as an idea, but as the reality of your being, not as something to attain, but as something already present. Let that remembrance be enough. For it is out of that remembrance that all healing flows, all guidance comes, all harmony appears. You need not struggle to make truth operate. Truth operates by virtue of its own nature. Your part is to be still and know. May the peace of the infinite presence accompany you. May the light of God illumine your path. May the grace of God unfold your days gently, effortlessly, naturally. And in that grace, may you find the freedom, the rest, and the inner assurance that come only from knowing I and the Father are one, always, forever, without separation.